Welcome back to the Nuggets of Gold podcast and YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about the 49ers and a kind of conversation that's been on Twitter a bunch lately. Are the 49ers actually Super Bowl contenders? I had a little segment I did, and I just did it solo probably a couple weeks ago. My point was, and this was before the season started, yes, the 49ers are Super Bowl contenders. Look at their roster, compare it to the 2019 roster. The defense might not quite be there, but the offense is on a whole different level. So we've seen a couple weeks of the year. Aiden, how do you feel about this team? And even though it's really early on, do you feel like the 49ers are Super Bowl contenders?
Yeah, so first I want to preface this by saying Matt and I are obviously a little bit biased. That's gonna happen, but I love the way that this team is built, and it's built to win playoff games. In the playoffs, the field shrinks, and you got to be able to get 3, 4, 5 yards consistently. And on the offensive line and defensive line, those are two of the Niners' biggest strengths. And I really trust both of those groups, assuming that right now they are healthy, they are deep. Um, I trust both those groups to win their individual matchups and to win as a group. I would feel confident. Like we saw the Niners struggle a little bit with that Eagles defensive line this past weekend, but I think they had like 1 yard a carry in the first half. By the end of the game, they were getting 3, 4 yards pretty consistently. And guys like Trey Sermon comes in for his first carry, and there's a hole, and he gets 12 yards, although he gets knocked out and is now in concussion protocol. The fact that he's able to get to that second level before getting touched in the fourth quarter of a tight game, that's the stuff that I love to see. And this Niners defensive line is probably the best in the entire league. Guys like Arden Key are just making plays. He should be a starter on probably 15 other teams in this league. We're going to see like rotational pieces. Bosa has 3 sacks in 2 games, playing like 65% of snaps. So I love the way that this team is built. And I think the Niners passing offense will slowly go. Right now, people are pretty worried about it because Kittle has like 80 yards receiving. Ayuk has 1 catch on the season. Debo's leading the league in receiving, but he has like 2/3 of the Niners total passing yards. So I think that they'll eventually get that into gear. Kyle will be able to scheme some people wide open, but I love the way that we're able to own the trenches, and that's how you win playoff games because stuff it gets cold, but the run game travels. We saw that in 2019. And I honestly don't think it matters who is running the ball for the 49ers. I think that Matt and I could have ran behind some of those holes against the Lions, and we probably would have died, but we would have picked up like 6 or 7 yards, and it would have been awesome. So offensive, defensive line are the reason the Niners are Super Bowl contenders.
So first guy I want to talk about is Arden Key, because you saying Arden Key might start for 15 teams might be shocking for some people. Arden Key has balled out this training camp. Like he looks like a great piece. Now take this because I'll say that I take this with a grain of salt because I don't really think that they're legit. But PFF did grade Arden Key as their top player. Now I'm not a person that really listens that much to PFF, but I have to agree. I did feel like I saw that on the field on Sunday as well. I felt like Arden Key was flashing a lot, and he's just playing as a reserve as well. So you bring up the trenches, you bring up this run game, you bring up that we could have got through, 5 yards through some of those holes. I also agree we probably would have got our heads taken off after that. However, the point is that when they are using this outside zone scheme, like what's the best possible personnel? It is probably like, and I'm not trying to be biased in this, it is probably George Kittle, uh, Trent Williams, Mike McGlinchey, and Kyle Juszczyk in terms of who you want at tackle, who you want at tight end, and who you want at fullback. Those are probably the top 4 names that you'd want to bring up. Now, Mike McGlinchey in the pass game is a little bit different. Obviously, there's been some issues there. So far this year, he's looked really good. But as a run blocking tackle, he is one of the top guys in the game. For Kyle's scheme, that is exactly what you want in terms of the run game. So that's what I'm specifically talking about here. If they're able to steal the edge, both on offense, and then on defense they're able to blow those spots up. That's how you make deep playoff runs. You know a team who's a prime example of that? The Buccaneers. Because yes, we could talk about Brady, but JPP, Shaq Griffin, Vita Vea, like all those guys in that defensive line, and there's a lot of guys, but those are the three biggest names, I think. That's the reason the Bucs looked so good in the Super Bowl, right? The Niners have that depth on the defensive line. They could go 2-3 deep. D Fords look good this year. Eric Armstead, though some people love to rip Eric Armstead, he actually has put up really solid numbers, had a ton of pressures. When he rushes from inside, oh my God, he is so good from inside. So when it gets to third down and on the interior are either Javon Kinlaw or DJ Jones next to Eric Armstead, and then on the outside is D Ford and Nick Bosa. And then every once in a while you throw in Samson Ebukam, or you throw in a nickel blitz from K'Wan Williams, because we know how good he is in that department. Like, they are so good on third down. Now, early in this game, or in the Eagles game, Jimmy Garoppolo could hit like the side of a barn. He could not throw a two ball. It was brutal. Still, go back to 2019. What was Jimmy's like bread and butter? Picked up third downs consistently. As the game went on yesterday, he started doing that a little bit more. So if they're able to keep executing on third down and they're able to stop teams on third down, what they are trying to win is the time of possession battle. That's what they're trying to do. And they have built this team, like you said, in such a great way for that to happen. So I agree with you. I think they're absolutely Super Bowl contenders. Does that mean they're Super Bowl favorites? No, that is completely different. I feel like some people, like, if you bring up Super Bowl contender, like, well, this team's there. It's like, well, yeah, of course. There's a handful of Super Bowl contenders. It's not like there's one team. Now, the NFC West is completely stacked. I still think the Buccaneers are probably the top roster in the league. I think they are the Super Bowl favorite. But in terms of Super Bowl contenders, the Niners are absolutely up there. They can hang in a game with the Bucs. They'll be able to hang in a game with the Rams. Same with the Seahawks, Cardinals. Yes, the NFC West is that good. They are stacked. We're going to see them play the Packers next week. I think they're going to look really good. Like, they're going to be winning a lot of games. If you look up, and another thing is, we don't really know what the quarterback position is going to look like come December, come January. It could still be Jimmy Garoppolo, or it could be Trey Lance. And if it is Trey Lance, it's very likely that he's had, quite a few games under his belt. So we don't really know how that's going to look. So there's definitely questions. And of course, the biggest question is going to be, how does this cornerback room hold up? Because that could get really scary. Luckily, 5th-round pick has looked like an absolutely stud in Deommodore Lenoir. Dude has balled out. So he's really saving the 49ers in that secondary right now. But when healthy, yes, they're 100% a Super Bowl contender. So I'm all there with you. But anything else you want to kind of add on this topic?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna put the wrong one in. Whoop. I think every team in the NFL has a weakness. There's no team this year where, like, you look at the roster and you're afraid of every single measure of their squad. The Bucs have this reputation of being a really good defense. They were the 29th ranked pass defense last year. They just had a really good playoff run, had a really good Super Bowl, and they were, I mean, people forget that chief offensive line was missing 3 starters, and they completely revamped it this offseason. They wanted to give Trent Williams even more money than the 49ers gave him. So I think people get caught up a little bit in the Rams have no weaknesses. Every team has weaknesses. We talked about some today. Obviously, we're going to hate a little bit on the Seahawks, the Cardinals, but you look at this 49ers team, their weaknesses align well with their strengths. I would say the weakest part on this entire roster is the corners. How do you make that better? You get a ton of pressure. Good thing we have maybe the deepest and strongest defensive line in the entire league, coupled with the best coverage linebacker in the entire league with 2 veteran safeties back there. So, and on the offensive end, maybe you say, we have a lot of running backs hurt right now. Good thing you got an awesome offensive line for right now, a veteran quarterback, but we both expect to see Lance play a little bit more throughout the course of this season. what better to take the pressure off your running back if your quarterback can also run? So I think the 49ers weaknesses align well with their strengths, and not a ton of teams can say that, which is why I expect them to make the playoffs. I expect them to win a playoff game, and I think if you're playing in the divisional, you are one of the four best teams left in your conference. You're definitely considered to be a Super Bowl contender because, as we saw last year, there's going to be some upsets. John Wolford is 1-0 in the playoffs. So anybody can beat anybody, especially in the playoffs. And I love that the strengths of this 49ers roster travel. That's really the biggest thing, because this division is going to be so tough to win that we're probably going to be on the road in that first playoff game. So loving that this team can run the ball, and I think we saw it last week. You're going to point out the Niners had like -5 yards rushing in the first quarter, but I think they ended up breaking 100. So I love that, and I'm super excited to see how the rest of the season goes.
One other thing to talk about that running game, it's not always about, oh, how many yards did you get? How many yards per carry did you get? The big thing, and Kyle's talked about this many times, one of the biggest things, how many attempts do you get? How many times can you go out there and you keep running the football and keep killing the clock? The Niners had 10 more minutes of possession against the Eagles. That's why they won that game. They easily could have lost that football game, but you have to find a way to survive. I think that people get a little like, if you don't look like a Super Bowl caliber team every single quarter of the whole season, then it's like, oh, like let's freak out. They're still built to win in these deep playoff runs, and I think that's a great point that you brought up about, the biggest like flaw of this team is the cornerback room. And like you said, there's two veteran safeties back there. There's also a backup veteran safety in Devon Wilson. And then you look at, yes, there's the best coverage linebacker in the league. And I believe that as well. Fred's definitely up there. I mean, we saw him go man up with Hollywood Brown and hang in there. That's ridiculous. And then the defensive line is super deep. So biggest factor for every single team, every single year is going to be health. But when you look at this team at where they are right now, you have to assume that they're a Super Bowl contender because of what's around them. How do they mask their flaws? They have a great defensive line. They have safety help over the top. Look at that Eagles game. The Niners are running press man, and a lot of times there were no safeties, but a lot of times it was either one of Jimmy Ward or Kowalski Tart back there, and it was one of them. And they made some great PBUs. Jimmy Ward had a fantastic play. Now, Diamador played amazing as well. Kowalski Tart, what's the biggest play of the game? A 91-yard pass to Quez Watkins. Kowalski Tart runs him down, tackles him at the 5, and then the defensive line and the linebackers hold, and the 49ers get the ball back and then drive down the field to score a touchdown. That's exactly the type of game the 49ers are trying to win. Like that's what their mold is. So I think it's great. I think they're built for a deep playoff run. I think them against the Bucks is such a fun matchup to watch because, like you said, there are some question marks about the Bucks, but there also is it's also like the same thing with the Niners. Like there are some question marks there as well. You see AB, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin against these corners. It's gonna look a little bit scary. It will. But then on the Niners side, they should play really well defense. Their defensive line, and yes, the Bucks offensive line is good, but Brady can't really move that well. And we've seen that the Niners defensive line is so good against quarterbacks like that, where they collapse the pocket against him. The Bucks defense, I don't really care what defense Niners are playing. They're gonna find a way to run the football. That's the bottom line of this team is they're going to be able to run the football. And even in that Eagles game where you're not even having like that great of a game on the ground, you still win the time of possession battle by 10 minutes. And that's the difference. That's winning the running football game. That's how you do it. That's Kyle's. And if you listen to Kyle talk, that's what he talks about. And if you asked him after the game, oh, how did you feel about the run game? You only averaged, I think it was like 3.5 yards per carry. It wasn't that good. He'd probably say, they thought they went out there, they did a great job. Because that number is also skewed because Jimmy Garoppolo picked up 5 first downs on quarterback sneaks, so, and also your running backs are getting injured left and right. So that's also another factor. One thing I will add before we go, I am super pumped for Elijah Mitchell as well. I thought he looked really good. he went out with a shoulder injury and he came back in and he kind of ran out that game. So props to him for being very, very tough and being a great player because he's looked really good early on. Gonna see how this running back room plays out with all the injuries right now. Sermon obviously in concussion protocol. Hasty's out, or Hasty's questionable, but we'll see how it plays out. But I still expect this run game to look really good. Really fun matchup against the Packers this next week, and then against the Seahawks. So great games to kind of test this team after what a lot of people thought would be a soft schedule early on with the Lions and the Eagles. Now I think the Eagles are much better than people thought, and the Lions offense actually looks pretty good. So those teams have looked all right. But I definitely think the Niners are Super Bowl contenders. Time will tell in terms of injuries, but there's a handful of teams in the NFC, and the Niners are definitely one of them, and they definitely should be. And they are one of the Super Bowl favorites, and there's a reason for that because they're Super Bowl contenders. So that's going to do it for today's episode. I'm going to post an episode tomorrow, just me, and then me and Aiden will have a couple coming out this weekend as well. So that's going to kind of be the schedule for this weekend. But thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you very soon.